And so during this, your kids are growing up because this doesn't seem like, the job that's giving you balance at home.
But it gives you balance in two ways, which women never talk about. One, you're paid more, so you get more money to be able to hire things in. But the real luxury in life when you are a working parent is to be able to control your schedule. And what you can do when you're the boss is control your schedule. So,
what did that mean?
Well, it just means that if your kids need you, you don't sweat buckets of anxiety that you're going to have to take the day off because you're the boss. And I always try and say to women, you want as much control over your schedule as you can get, because that's the thing that means it's less stressful having children.
Today on The Messy Parts, we're going to talk about how curiosity can drive ambition. We have on Joanna Coles. She is at the epicenter of the media landscape, starting in the UK, but really here in New York City. The thing about curiosity is that it can get you to the top and also have you wonder at that moment if you should pause and step off. You once jumped into a taxi to ambush a CEO for a job, one of my favorite stories. Today, a 24-year-old doing the same thing might be called unhinged. Is that the kind of hustle you think people need to land a job today? Or do you think that was just a thing of our era?
The hustle that people need to land a job is to do something that makes them stand out, and it should be appropriate for the job and their level of experience. So I hustled my way. We literally drag raced up Park Avenue until Kathy Black, who was the then CEO of Hearst magazines, pulled over and I leapt into her car. But I was in my early 40s and I'd earned the experience to do that. But there are lots of ways to stand out. One of the most effective things someone did to me actually was send me a packet of my favourite biscuits, Hobnobs, McVitie's Hobnobs, with a note saying, I've read that you like Hobnobs, would love to come and talk to you. It was an excellent letter. It was written in beautiful penmanship in the door.
And did they get the job?
They didn't get the job because I didn't have a job for them. But what they did get was me as a quasi-mentor for a bit. And then I followed their career and I've talked about them with other people.
I like that story. Okay, so one of the things you've been known to say more recently, for which I like to say you've gone viral, is that feminism got it wrong. Now, I don't know that everybody would agree, which is great. I actually love that. For somebody who's 28 years old, working 80 hours a week, freezing their eggs, are you telling them that feminism got it wrong and they should be living their life differently? What's the lesson from that for you?
What I wish I had done when I was younger was think about the whole life that I wanted to lead, not just about the career opportunities that were opening up to me. And I graduated in 1984, which is the Jurassic period to, I'm sure, lots of people watching and listening to this. But at the time, what was exciting, and I sense there is still a moment of this going on now, is there were opportunities opening up for women that we were excited to seize. What there wasn't was any conversation about how fun it is to be a parent. At the time, the conversation was about it's exhausting to be a parent, you're going to have to juggle, it's very expensive, you're going to be depressed. There were none of the fun parts of being a parent presented. And when you become a parent, which I'm very glad I did, and I had my first son at 36, my second son at 39, I felt as if I wish someone had said to me, it is going to be so much more fun. And while it's fantastic to have a big career and a big job, and I've loved mine and it's not yet over, the thing that is most important to me is having been a mother. And that's the bit that I think feminism doesn't celebrate enough. But the expectations we put on mothers are ridiculous. And I want to remind people that this is one of the most natural things to do, and we shouldn't make it seem like it's impossible.
That's a definitely different thing than many might have thought you meant. So I think that's good that we talked about that. I think as women in particular...
Well, what I will say is that I don't think feminism celebrated being a mother. I think they derided being a mother. I think they diminished it. And it's one of the most important roles a woman can have.
It's not so much about that you can't have both. You can actually celebrate it, even though it can at times be difficult, but also joyful.
Everything's difficult.
Mhm.
And
Everything is
anything that is
difficult.
worth anything is difficult. And this idea that it's not drives people to madness.
We're going to start the conversation. We sort of already started the
Well,
conversation.
I feel like we got straight into it, which I would expect nothing else, Mariam, from your conversations, which I think are striking a really interesting new note.
Well, first of all, I want to say thank you. I didn't get a chance to say that when you walked in the door. I really appreciate your coming on the podcast.
Pleasure.
You and I got to know each other when you were at Mary Claire. And my favorite note of the day, because we've now done 40 podcasts, which is hard to believe, is that when I send a loose framework to say this is the general themes of the conversation, you are literally the only person who sent me notes back.
Oh, really? Oh, God, that's the editor in me.
I was just going to say, an editor writing the narrative with me. So you grow up in Yorkshire, you go to London.
Yorkshire is, for people who don't know, like the Texas of Britain. Just saying.
Okay,
so it's
fine.
a little wild up there. It's Wuthering Heights. It's where the Brontes came from.
So from Yorkshire to London, you make your way, you get married, and you come to New York first for the Telegraph or the Times, and then for the Guardian.
No, I come for the Guardian as the bureau chief for the Guardian. Then after a year, I moved to the Times, and we get married after 9/11 when I'm just about to have my second son, because at the time, for those who were here in New York, everything felt very uncertain. They were talking about deporting foreigners. I was anxious because my oldest son, who was then 2.5, had an American passport, but I had a British passport still. And my husband and I, at that point, weren't married. So we wanted all our papers in order.
And you ended up actually writing a book together.
We wrote a book together about what it was like moving to New York and having a baby together.
Kind of a diary, his version, your version.
He says, she says. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. So oftentimes people take a job to become bureau chief of the Guardian. It's kind of like you're checking the box and then you go back. You didn't do that. Why not?
I had a wonderful career in London. I've been there for 13 years. London is quite small compared to America. I've always loved the idea of America. I studied American literature and American history at university. And I was just excited at the idea of moving here because it's so much bigger and the stakes are higher. You get paid more. The opportunities are bigger. And that was very exciting to me. And people characterize me as very ambitious because I've had a big career. I'm actually not that ambitious. What I am
No.
What I was going to say is what I'm not actually is ambitious. What I am is curious. I am really curious and I like being in the next room and I'm interested in the next thing.
I'm totally going to push back on you.
That's what drives me.
I'm totally pushing back on you.
Well, that's what drives me. I'm a journalist. I love asking questions. I like knowing what the next thing is. We are living at an incredible moment in the culture in terms of what's happening, what's happening with AI, what's happening with the impact of tech on our lives. Who isn't interested in that? I don't understand it when people aren't interested in it and don't want to find out more about it.
But you start off as sort of a journalist writing about world affairs. You pivot to women's magazines, right? Like women's empowerment, right? You go from Mary Claire to Cosmo, 17.
Well, I pivot from news to magazines because I have 2 sons and I can't just drop everything and rush off to big news events because I have 2 little children at home who I want to see. So actually, when they grow up and leave home, I have the opportunity to go back into news, which is what I'm doing at the Daily Beast, and which requires more of you than magazines did back then.
But actually, you made me think of something. So when you decide to stay in the States, you can't stay with the British papers that you're with. First, you go to New York Magazine, and then you go to a woman's magazine that was for women over 40.
Yeah, called More. So I went to New York Magazine, actually at the recommendation of Michael Wolff, and they get me a work visa. And then by the time, so I do 3 years there, then I go to More Magazine for a year before I take the Marie Claire job, at which point I have a green card.
But that More Magazine job was a job that was probably not big enough for you, but you took it. And I'm sort of curious about that, right? Because I think everybody thinks that the ladder is like a regular climb up. And sometimes you do sideways moves, even what you're describing now of moving to women's magazines to be able to prioritize your kids versus being able to travel at the drop of a dime, right? That move was not a move that many people would have made.
Well, I wasn't anticipating making it. Actually, what happened is I was at New York Magazine, which was very demanding work time-wise. And I was very fond of it because they gave me a visa and it was my first experience in American media, which is different to British media. So there was a sort of cultural absorption for me of, oh, they do it differently in America. Then I moved to more because I went as the number 2, which was fun. But when I went for the interview, I met Peggy Northrup, the then editor, and I just really liked her. And I thought, oh, it would be fun to work with someone who is a woman in a senior position. She seems really interesting, really nice. She was doing something interesting. I was just over 40. It was very much talking about all the things that are now in fashion, perimenopause, menopause, all those kind of issues that really people weren't talking about. This was 20 years ago. And it felt like interesting subject matter to me. I was living the subject matter. I really liked Peggy. And I did the job for a year, and the job got me to Marie Claire.
Why did you only stay a year?
Because the Marie Claire job came up.
Mm-hmm. Did you think that was a sideways move? That you should stay at New York Magazine? I mean, did that ever even occur to you? Like, maybe this isn't... Because, there's ego involved sometimes. It gets in the way of people taking opportunities because they think, like, I'm too big for this.
No, I didn't think that. And that's never actually how I've approached a job. I'm just like, is this going to be interesting? I had done 3 years at New York Magazine. It was intense. Adam Moss, the editor, wasn't going anywhere. So I was sort of blocked in terms of my desire to figure out what is it like to run a place. It was a more senior job at More, though arguably the footprint of More was smaller for New York. But I was really interested in the subject matter. And it's always interesting editing something that is about the life you are living.
And so the curiosity is really sort of what moves you, it sounds
Curiosity is always what moves me. And also what was fun was the readership around More was deeply passionate because no one else was doing this. No one wanted to talk about women over 40. I mean, now you see the L'Oreal ad with Gillian Anderson saying, oh, I'm invisible, I'm invisible. This was stuff we were talking about 20 years ago and more.
So you go to Marie Claire and then Cosmo, right? And you have sort of this, what looks from the outside like a, meteoric rise.
It was super fun, super fun.
Super fun. And you begin to, your curiosity really comes to play because it's sort of the beginning of when media starts to get disintermediated. But you begin leaning to all kinds of things like doing series on YouTube and partnerships with Snap. And it's this incredible journey where also you become way more known as an entity yourself. What was that like?
Well, it was just part of the job, really. I mean, if you're going to do those jobs, someone has to sort of lead from the front. And if you're the editor-in-chief, that's what you end up doing. But I work with incredibly talented people. I mean, one of my first hires at Marie Claire was Lucy Kalin, who was by far the best sort of profile writer out there. She'd spent nearly 20 years at GQ. And Nina Garcia, who'd been at Elle. She was Project Runway, so she was much better known than I was. Fantastic fashion director, really fun to work with. And, we would go to the fashion shows and fall about laughing. It was so much fun. And it was the heady end of times at magazines. You knew the end was coming. You could see the rise of digital. It wasn't going to last. And so I think we sort of enjoyed every moment of it.
And so during this, your kids are growing up because this doesn't seem like, the job that's giving you balance at home.
But it gives you balance in 2 ways, which women never talk about. One, you're paid more, so you get more money to be able to hire things in. But the second most important thing, and I always remember Kristen Gillibrand saying this to me, the junior senator from New York, the real luxury in life when you are a working parent is to be able to control your schedule. And what you can do when you're the boss is control your schedule. So,
what did that mean?
Well, it just means that if your kids need you, you can say to someone, I'm sorry, I can't do this, or I'm going to be late in tomorrow because I've got to go to a sporting thing, or I'm going to read the story tomorrow in, my 5-year-old's class, or I'm leaving early tonight because I'm going to the school play, or one of your children is ill. You don't sweat buckets of anxiety that you're going to have to take the day off because you're the boss. And I always try and say to women, you want as much control over your schedule as you can get because that's the thing that means it's less stressful having children.
I will say having a BlackBerry also became a game changer because you could be in touch from the ballet recital if you needed
Yeah,
to
of
be.
course. Well, and now now everybody understands the benefits of working from home and Zoom and all those things. Post-COVID, we're much more cognizant of that.
But were there messy parts to that journey, like versus what it looks like from the outside, which is just a meteoric rise?
Well, looking at it from the outside and saying, oh, it was just a meteoric rise isn't really understanding what the job is. I did 6 years at Marie Claire to prepare for the Cosmo job, which was the biggest title that Hearst had. And again, was enormous fun to do.
Helena Gurley Brown was like a storied.
Well, she was an incredible editor ahead of her time who really rebuilt the modern magazine. I mean, she really created it and came to it at a time when women were changing, when the pill had just arrived. I think she took over the editorship of Cosmo the same year the pill came out. So this understanding that you could have sex without really worrying that you were going to get pregnant was a huge sort of moment. Helen was really, the doyenne of editors who for 3 generations of women remade the magazine. There would be no modern Vanity Fair without Helen Gurley Brown. Tina Brown did an incredible job reimagining it, but actually Helen built the template and didn't quite get credit for it.
And actually was not afraid of living a bit out loud, which was unusual for her generation.
But to your point about, was it messy? All jobs are messy. It doesn't matter if you're doing a big job or a little job. They're all messy, right? I mean, unless you're literally doing the same thing every single day. And even then it can get messy. What I loved about the job was that every day was different. And it was at a time when women's magazines mattered and they had a voice and they brought information that wasn't in the flow. I think that women miss them. And Instagram is not the same. And you don't get the same voyage of discovery on Instagram. You don't get the same voice. It's a mashup of lots of different voices, no matter how good your algorithmic feed is. And I miss the point of view of a good magazine.
I loved magazines, loved them. I remember going to an A&A conference where they had just all the magazines and you could just take them. And there wasn't enough room in my suitcase to bring
Right.
them
No. And I remember, you go on a flight and you go to Hudson News and you stock up with magazines. Now you go to Hudson News and it's just nuts.
But I don't enjoy them the same way either. And maybe because they're not what they used to be.
Well, they're not as good. They don't have the money. And it's incredibly difficult, as everybody found out, to compete with the phone. It's incredibly difficult to compete with that sense of being connected right now to your friends and to things that your friends are doing. And the point of magazines when we were growing up was that they were this, and I've used this expression before, but I think it's a very apt one. They're like a finger beckoning you to the future. They're full of new things that you don't know about, new ideas, new events, new fashion, and new ideas which are going to fuel you for the next month. And I think that's missing from the culture right now. That's not what you get from Instagram or TikTok.
So we both came up in an industry where we saw, right? If you were curious and had any wherewithal, you saw the disintermediation that was coming towards you.
Yeah.
And we both love a good turnaround and we went in to try and fix things. But what was it like for you knowing that that business was going to really pivot in a big way?
Well, it was a combination of exhilarating because change is always sort of, I'm someone that likes change and I'm sort of curious about it. And then it's sort of nerve-wracking because essentially what I was doing in that job, as well as trying to sort of pivot to digital and figure out new digital partners with, Facebook or Snapchat or Instagram or whatever, was you're managing decline. You can see that there is a movement of people away from print to the phone, precisely because the phone is this incredibly engaging instrument. We're beginning to live there. We're beginning to watch things there. We're abandoning television in the same way. And that legacy media was being structurally challenged in an unexpected and much faster way than people had anticipated. But, at Hearst, they were very good. We were very good at building all sorts of digital channels. But you weren't going to be able to beat Instagram or TikTok or Snapchat because they had a scale that we didn't have. And they were purely digital and were built for the job. And were built for the phone. They were built around the phone.
They didn't have the tech debt. I mean, I remember when Tina Brown merged Newsweek with the Daily Beast, I thought to myself, oh my God, they're taking on all the issues of Newsweek, like to a company that was on on the move. It was like all of a sudden it was going to get all the hindrances of legacy media. You knew that that was going to bring its own complications. And I say that as somebody who was part of the turnaround team at Gannett at a time where, it still owned the TV stations and the newspapers. And, to your point, you're trying to reimagine the business as it's declining. My favorite was when they convinced me to take on national sales. I was like, why am I taking on national sales? Like, I'm going to go to the board and report a declining number? That doesn't sound like a good game plan.
No fun at all. No fun at all.
And the days where there was good news, the publisher of USA Today would share the good news first because, that was good news to share. And I was like, okay, wait, I'm only going to be giving the bad news? It's like, this is great.
That's not fun. But what I was always looking for was context. How bad was it for everybody else? And were we maintaining market share or occasionally growing market share even when you were declining?
So you do this incredible rise and David Carey's about to move on and you get bypassed for the big job. My favorite thing was going back to watch that video of you on your walking treadmill desk, not just going out quietly, but going out very publicly, kind of like a millennial. That was a total boss move.
Well, that treadmill desk was really fun. I mean, to be fair, I didn't have the skills that David Carey or Troy Young, who took over. They were much more business than I was. My skill is as an editor. That's what I'm good at. And that's not what that role is.
But still, you could have just been like, okay, fine, I'm going to stay here and be a good girl and just make it work.
Well, I almost did, actually. And then I thought, I've been here 12 years. My younger son was about to go off to college. There were other things I wanted to do, and I wanted to try different things, which I couldn't do in that role. It just felt like, sometimes there are moments where you just think, oh, there's a break in the clouds here. I should take that route.
You basically took a pause and you announced your pause quite publicly. And I know lots of people
I didn't take a pause, actually. That's not how I thought of it. What happened was I left the magazine industry.
But actually, if you go back and look at that video, you say, I'm pausing, more news to come.
Well, that might have just been about me saying that I was going to do something else.
Yeah. And I think you did a whole bunch of different things before you locked into one thing. You sort of did a portfolio play.
Right.
Which I know lots of people are going through today, honestly. And in that moment of interval where they're trying to do the portfolio thing until they figure out what the next thing is that they're going to do, it can be very difficult, and particularly difficult when you walk into a party and you've been the former or whatever, to now be like, I'm doing the portfolio thing. I'm doing a bunch of different things. I don't know what I'm doing. Was that difficult for you? Because what I loved about it, and I think there's a lesson in that, is that you took the bull by the horn and you were like, I'm announcing it. I'm not hiding from the fact that I'm on a journey.
I was in the very fortunate position of having a lot of things offered to me. And what I knew I didn't want to do was tie myself down to the next corporate gig.
How did you know that?
Because I'd come out of 12 years of doing a sort of corporate gig. I mean, as much fun as being a magazine editor is, it's a corporate job. Mm-hmm. And I had a development deal with ABC Studios to develop more television. I just wanted to try different things. And also the industry was changing. I joined the board of Snapchat. Mm-hmm. I then joined the board of Sonos, the software and hardware company. I did some investing, which was fun, and I hadn't really had time to do before. And I joined a series of small private boards that were more venture companies. And I had a sort of blast, actually, trying things. I became an advisor to Masterclass. I was an advisor to Bustle Digital Media. It was fun to have different influences and not to have to wake up and think about one particular thing in the morning.
Were there days in that were difficult?
There are always days that are difficult in everything that you do. So what the difficult things were managing a lot of different people. So managing a lot of different founders, trying to remember to stay on top of the issues that each different company had. But I actually found it very stimulating.
I would say there's a lot of context switching when you're in the portfolio phase, because it's not like you're digging in to make Cosmo work. To your point, you're managing a lot of different things.
Right.
But there are also days where I say to myself, oh, it was easier being the former global CMO of Hyatt Hotels. There was one thing to focus on. Now I'm juggling lots of things. And you're having to sort of make your own way versus just plug into a system that exists. It's not just all amazing and rosy, right? It's still hard. but it requires way more self-determination than showing up at a job where, you're sort of working in the system.
Well, a job has a momentum to it,
Yeah.
which just, you sort of, as you say, you fit into the momentum. I quite liked having 2 hours in the middle of the day to go to the gym or to go shopping or to walk around Central Park. I liked the freedom, and I don't have any issues.
You never had anxious moments of being like, oh my God, it's over. Or, oh my God, I made a mistake. You have no self-doubt? It's amazing.
No, I have plenty of self-doubt, but it doesn't show up. That's not how it shows up.
How did the anxiety show up? Or the self-doubt?
That's a very good question. How did the anxiety and the self-doubt show up? Probably in just spending extra time on work for people that you didn't know very well because you wanted to make sure that they really understood what you were trying to do.
Because you wanted to make sure you were doing a good job.
Yeah, and I wanted them to know I was doing a good job. And I wanted to be doing a good job. When you don't know, founders in particular, I've worked with a lot of them, of big tech companies, can be very demanding. They can be very capricious. And so you want to make sure that you've really prepared so that they can't throw something at you that you haven't thought about.
Why? Because you have a feeling that they're trying to get you?
Yeah, frequently. I think lots of people feel like that working with them.
Did you not feel that way when you were in the corporate world?
No, I never felt like that in the corporate world, actually.
What's the difference?
Well, I think it's very different if you founded your own company. I think people who found their own companies often think that other people are either taking advantage of them or don't fully understand what they're trying to do, or that the only way they can do this is a certain way because that's the way it's worked for them. And I think people in bigger corporations that have had experience working in other companies are often more flexible.
One of the things that happened in that period when you left was that you were playing tennis and you told your husband you were done. That was a big moment because you'd been married for a long time, 2 beautiful boys who are now launched. I'm giving you the launch.
Well, they're independent financially. It's fantastic.
Totally
and they've
launched.
both got jobs. Yes, thank you.
So something clearly broke for you to walk away.
Well, I wouldn't think of it as breaking. I think that the way we talk about relationships in our culture is kind of hung up and we use the wrong language. I think that we had a very successful 28-year relationship. And then I wanted to sort of see the world beyond it.
I mean, I know a lot of people wait until their boys are out of college or their kids are out of college before they make a decision like that. Were you waiting?
No, I mean, I just think that I reached a point where my life was in a period of change and I sort of wanted more change.
It's interesting. I've noticed, and Brooke Baldwin was here, and one of the things when she left CNN she talked about was she made a lot of changes, and one of them was on the personal side.
Right.
Because sometimes when you're in the system making it work, you're just holding it all together.
Right.
But when you step away, you actually have the wherewithal to ask yourself what you want.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think when you're both parenting together, there's, again, momentum. There's momentum in the workplace when you have a job, and there's momentum in family life. And then the momentum changes because our older son had gone to college. Our younger son was about to finish high school. He had 1 more year to go. And you're just like, I think I want to change here.
Was that difficult?
Yeah, of course it was difficult.
Messy?
No, well, I don't think of it as particularly messy, but it was certainly difficult.
You don't think of much as particularly messy. I just want to point out to you.
I think of lots of things as messy, and I think of lots of things as difficult. I think that's what life is. I don't come at this thinking that life is supposed to be a straight line and there should be no mess. I am conscious that life is chaotic, that you have no idea if I leave here, I could get knocked over by a car on the way home. I'm very much someone that sort of tries to live both in the moment and have a larger sense of A, how lucky I am, and B, to seize every opportunity and moment.
I always have a plan B and a C because I'm waiting for the chaos.
Right. Well, and you're waiting for something to go wrong, always. And if you've been in news as long as I have, you sort of assume that something will go wrong.
Well, and I get that from my childhood of having experienced much, revolution, this being thrown here,
leaving
being thrown
home.
there.
Yeah.
Right? People call me and ask me about what's going on in Iran. And I said, I've been living with, sort of a numbness about that for 47 years. So of course I
Wow.
check the news. Of course I check in on people, but it's hard for me to feel. Like, really, I think there was only one moment a couple of years ago during the Women Life Freedom thing where I actually felt something about it. Sometimes I can seem callous because I move through it. And my daughter will say, well, mom doesn't have normal reactions.
Well, I'm sure you have normal reactions. But I all of life is chaos and messy every single day.
I want to talk about AI for a second because this is a little bit reminiscent of the early days of the internet, where AI, wherever it goes, which I don't think we all can see totally clearly, is bringing a very big level of disintermediation to all kinds of things, including the media business, for example. You were around when, the internet came about, and we sort of experienced that. And we've seen the ramifications of that because our business was very much impacted by that. What are you seeing? What excites you? And what are you worried about?
Oh, well, lots of it excites me. I mean, it's fantastic to be able to do things so much faster than you used to be able to do. How we use it at the Daily Beast is to try and think about more efficient ways of bringing stories to people. We don't use it to do our journalism. And actually, happily, one of the things AI can't really do is predict what news is going to happen. I'm stretching because, as you know, in my last 4 months, I've had 2 hip replacements.
That's right. There's your messy part.
That was messy. Yeah. Although, I mean, I will say, shout out to NYU Langone. It went as well as it possibly could, but I do need to stretch this leg right now.
Stretch away. Do you want to pause?
Okay. No, I'm fine, but I'm just conscious that I'm sitting on my side to talk to you more efficiently.
And
actually,
I do that myself too, because as you know, I also
you also have hip issues. So I'm just going to do this. We bonded over our hip issues, and I'm just going to say that you will feel better when you've had them done. If you decide to have them done, it's great to be pain-free.
I'm holding out.
Okay. You don't need to hold out.
Okay, let's come back to AI.
Yeah, well, if you need a good surgeon, I can recommend Matthew Heppenstall at NYU Langone. Changed my life.
Right here.
Changed my life.
Okay, AI.
Yes,
I'm assuming
AI,
Matthew didn't use AI on your hips, but
I don't think he used
Who knows?
AI. But I'm sure that when I go for my mammogram next week, I would rather have it checked against, I want the AI running through it to check it against 500,000 other mammograms rather than just one doctor who's exhausted from, the night before. I mean, listen, it's going to transform all sorts of things. And it's pretty exciting. I mean, we've been using it at Snapchat for a long time, so I've had some sort of insights there. But, I have Claude and I have ChatGPT, and I sort of use them for everything. And actually, I had an interesting incident the other day where, coming off the painkillers for my hip, I woke up one morning feeling kind of trembly and anxious and fragile, which is not how I normally wake up in the morning.
Definitely not.
And then I suddenly realized that I'd finished my 10 days of tramadol. So I went on ChatGPT just to check it out, and literally I had every single symptom. And because I'd been asking it about my surgery, it came up with a whole thing. The minute I read it, I understood I was in a kind of very mild, frankly, opiate withdrawal. And it was very helpful. It gave me a really good perspective. So I think it's fantastic.
Okay. So, one of the moments of reinvention you had was you went into the world of SPACs, by the way.
Right.
Which, again, I love you for being like, yeah, I can do that. And people always say to me, like, you've moved industries. Now, I never thought to go into the world of finance. I think I tried investment banking and ran away.
But you tried it. I had never gone into finance. I wasn't sure if I would like it. It was very different to what I expected. And then COVID.
In what way?
Well, the people were different to how I expected them to be. And I think if you're a journalist, you always think perhaps there are more interesting people working in other careers. And the way we fetishize rich people in our culture made me think, well, maybe the bankers are really the interesting people. And then
really?
I spent time with them. Well, I'd never really had any exposure to them. And I thought, well, I found it a very interesting diversion. It was during COVID, so we did a lot of it on Zoom. And then when COVID was over, I stopped doing it.
While that may not have been the success that you might have wanted going in, definitely a learning for you, I think, in a lot of different ways. For people who are looking to pivot and might have fear of trying different things, what's the advice you have for them to actually lean into trying different things? Because I generally find people are wary.
Well, I think you have to decide if you want to try it. Do you want to commit 6 months or a year or 2 years of your life to this? Why not try things? I mean, I don't really understand when people don't try things.
You're not afraid of failure.
No, of course not. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid of failure.
Why not?
Well, because no life is without failure, right? And you're never going to try anything if you're afraid of failure.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in that. But, I also joined a flash mob on Sunday. So most people think like, oh, my God. Okay, so then you make this pivot to the Daily Beast, right? What makes you decide to go back into media?
My partner, Ben Sherwood, a business partner, and
From
I...
ABC.
Yeah, he left ABC at the same time as I left Hearst, and we had always wanted to work together. He was on the West Coast, I was on the East Coast, and we thought of trying to create actually what turned out to be Substack, but a sort of journalistic agency where journalists were news creators. Barry Diller, who owns the Daily Beast or owns half of the Daily Beast, his banker approached Ben and I to see if we would be interested in doing the Daily Beast
Were you already
together.
partnering, you and Ben?
Well, we'd been working on a project that we called Scoop from the Evelyn Waugh novel. And we were approached and asked if we would think of doing the Daily Beast together. We'd both looked at it separately. And we hadn't even thought of doing it together. And it suddenly felt like, oh, why wouldn't we take on a brand like this? It's a fantastic brand. It was an election year and we both love news. And we were like, why not? Let's give it a try. Let's leap in together, which we did. And then we lucked into, as you know, the most almighty news cycle. And we couldn't have anticipated that.
And you already knew Michael Wolff.
Well, Michael Wolff came along as the sort of the second year, but the first year we started the day of the Stormy Daniels trial. Then there was the Butler, Pennsylvania shooting. There was the unexpected return of Donald Trump in the November election. And it was just an incredible cycle. He's a tabloid president. The Daily Beast is a tabloid site, a smart tabloid site. And it felt like the two were made for each other. I had known Michael Wolff for a long time. He'd written 4 incredibly successful books on Donald Trump, had enormous access to Donald Trump. And so it felt very natural to reach out to him and say, you should be contributing. We started a podcast. Michael became an incredibly popular
Inside
guest
the head
on
of
it.
Trump.
We revamped the Daily Beast podcast. Michael came on. And then it was very clear that there was room for a spin-off podcast with Michael that we called Inside Trump's Head and has gone on to be one of, well, YouTube told us it was their fastest growing political.
Yeah, millions of people listen.
It's really fun. And then Michael had spent a lot of time with Jeffrey Epstein. That whole story broke again. And Epstein had been a big source for Michael about Donald Trump and Donald Trump's world. Again, we had no idea this was coming, that Michael was a very useful navigator through the world of Jeffrey Epstein, which has bewildered people and confused people. And turns out he was sitting at the center of an astonishing network of people from, British Prince Andrew to Bill Gates to, God knows who.
What surprised you about this part of the journey?
Well, just how much fun it was. And also that you have pattern recognition when you're rebuilding a brand, which I'd done at Marie Claire, I'd done at Cosmo. You have a sort of playbook of what this feels like. And Ben is a fantastic, he's created so many playbooks for very successful news brands.
You clearly love news, and you definitely are always curious and looking for the next thing, right? When Mamdani started running, did you see his trajectory?
No, because I wasn't paying attention to New York news. I was very, very absorbed by the bigger story, by the Trump story.
But now when you see that having played out, what's your takeaway from that? Like, what's your news view of that?
Well, I think he's a once-in-a-generation politician. I think he's incredibly talented. I think, what's interesting is that he appears to be without a party. I don't quite know what being a democratic socialist means beyond what he's doing with the job right now. But I think he was elected on a mood, and I think he's sunny, he's smiley, he's clearly wildly inexperienced.
But very good at retail politics.
Fantastic at retail politics. And it turns out that's what people like. That's what people responded to. And he's funny. I mean, the sense of humor, Donald Trump is funny, and the sense of humor gets you a long way. And it's a really undervalued quality of being a politician.
Okay, well, we're going to do quick rapid fire. All right, what's an alternate career you would have picked?
fighter pilot.
When was the last time you cried?
I never cry.
I knew you were going to say that.
Actually, that's not true. You know what? The last time I cried was actually yesterday when I went for my follow-up appointment with my hip surgeon, the man who's changed my life.
The man who's going to change my life.
Yes. And when I started thanking him profusely towards the end of our follow-up appointment, I could feel myself building to tears of gratitude. So obviously I stuffed them down.
Because God forbid we cry.
Yeah.
What's one thing you'd never do again?
Well, actually, there was an episode of Project Runway where I wore bright yellow pants. I would never wear them again. And they had too high of a waist. And it looked like I was a child who'd had someone pulled their pants right up under their armpits. I would never wear those yellow pants again.
Burn them. I'm with you.
They went a long time ago.
You know what? I'm glad to hear that. Joanna, thank you so much for coming on. This was as much fun as I expected, maybe even more.
Good. Well, I'm thrilled to be here, and I hope it's messy enough for you.
I hope you enjoyed this episode with Joanna Coles. I know that she has a lot of really interesting nuggets. Now, remember, tell 10 friends, like it, review it. That's how we get to tell you more messy stories.